Hi everyone, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate 5 demo for the piece I call Marked Revisited. So a while back I did this piece in Procreate, and it's actually on the channel. You can watch the video for this, I'll link it down below, but it was called Marked, and for the longest time I liked this. I thought that it stood fine on its own, just being a line drawing, but there was also a part of me that always thought it'd be really fun to color it. I actually started coloring it a while ago, but it just, for whatever reason, I lost interest and then I abandoned it. And then recently I thought, hey, let's go ahead and pull that out again and give it some color. So that's what we're going to be doing here. We're going to start with the line portion, although it's set to go very, very quickly right now. If you want to see the longer breakdown of the lines and where I actually talk about the design and all that, again, that is already posted on the channel. The video is called Marked, and I will link it in the description below. For now, all we'll talk about is that the original idea behind this piece was that I just wanted to do something where it was very stark. There's the really strong black hair. The rest of it is basically just white because it is just a black and white drawing, and then she has nothing but black tattoos on her. I generally don't design characters that have just black tattoos, so I just thought it would be a nice strong image to play with the black and the white and the really strong contrast that's happening there. You can see here that I'm building all of the tattoo designs sort of on their own. I'm trying to make them look like they are tattooed, although I go into much greater detail in the original video. For now, all you need to know is that a lot of these were designs that I already had, just kind of laying around, and then I worked them up in a black and gray style for this design. Now, when we get to the actual coloring, the thing that's kind of cool about this is because they are separate pieces like this, I can just reuse them when we get to the color stage. So the plan here is that I'm going to keep all of the tattoos as the original lines, because that'll just work as far as the look and feel, but then all of the lines that are involved in defining the character will go away. I also want to stop and say sorry if my voice sounds weird or if I'm having trouble pronouncing certain words. Right as I sat down to record this, I had a bit of like an allergy attack, seasonal allergy stuff, and my nose is like completely full. So I'm doing my best, but I wanted to make sure that I got this video done because this is the only window I'll have to do it all week, and I want to get it done before the end of the week so that there are 2 videos this week, the Q&A and then this one. So now that's wrapping up right there, and we're going into the coloring. So now we are on to what recently happened in the piece, not what happened a couple years ago when I did the other one. So you can see the first step was, of course, turning off all of the tattoos. Since the tattoos in real world sort of sit on or under technically, but on your skin, we can just turn them off and apply them later. Right now, we're just going to paint her as though she doesn't have the tattoos, and we're going to paint her as if she doesn't have that hair right now because it's just simpler. Not only do I reuse the tattoos, but I also reuse the hairlines that I created originally for the hair. We're using the symmetry tool. This was originally painted with the symmetry tool. I'm now using it again here to do the painting. Or rather, it was drawn originally with the symmetry tool, and we're using it again now to do the painting, and that will just speed everything up. Now, one thing that I did do is I used the symmetry tool for all of the flats, and I use it for the ambient occlusion pass, but I do not use it for the direct light pass because I wanted to make it less symmetrical, which is funny because the original drawing is symmetrical. You can see even the shadow underneath her neck is symmetrical, so she's basically lit just top down kind of, but we end up changing that up a little bit just to make it a little bit more interesting in the painting part. Now, I planned for her to have the black lips, but you can see there I put in the pink first. I wanted to have some of the black lipstick worn away, and so I wanted to make sure that her lips were colored accurately underneath that. That's something that you see me do a lot, like for instance when I was doing the painted girl, where I'll make sure that all of the building blocks of that character are there, just because we may reveal them in some way. So for this, we have the redness of her lips, of her natural lips, and then we've got the black lipstick on top that's been kind of erased away to expose a little bit of that. In some ways, working with all of these layers actually allows you to build things closer to the way they would be in real life, just in the sense that they are layered. They are a composite of multiple things happening. So that's kind of a nice factor here. Also, since we're zoomed in, I want to note that the recording quality is a little lower. That's because since this was based off of the original file, it is the lower recording quality from back when I had it set lower. So it's not that big a deal. Ultimately, we're going to see it, and it's not gonna, it's not gonna be unclear what's happening. It's just gonna be a little crunchy if I zoom in. So here I'm taking the lines that make up the hair, which was originally drawn with the older fat pencil, and I am just kind of filling them out a little bit more to make sure that it looks less like a pencil, although in some spots it certainly still does, and I'm using the new turpentine brush in order to fill that out a little bit and adjust some of those strokes. You can also see that her hair is no longer exactly black. It is now slightly lighter than black, and you can notice that when the lines get turned on, it's actually darker in those spots. So now we're doing the ambient occlusion pass. The shadows in this are fairly desaturated because I wanted the overall piece to be desaturated. It's all blue, it's mostly cool, and it's largely desaturated. I just kind of wanted to have that vibe from the beginning. So now, since we have all those tattoos turned off, it's easier to focus on the anatomy, not worrying about the tattoos, because you wouldn't anyways, right? The tattoos are going to be on top of the anatomy no matter what, so you build that part first, then you put the tattoos on. Now, one thing is, I didn't adjust any of the tattoos to accent the anatomy any more than they originally were when I did the 2D drawing. I guess you could say maybe that's a little bit of laziness, but it was more just it looked fine, and I didn't think that it needed to be pushed that much more in that way. So right now we're working on that ambient occlusion pass. You can see in the ears we're still using the symmetry tool because we are still doing the parts that are symmetrical. Now when we get to addressing all the hair, which is the hair and the piercing, those are the only asymmetrical aspects of the AO lighting, so we will on a new layer address those when we get to it. You can also see here we turn off the black lipstick so that we can do the AO pass on the lips and just better see what's happening here. With the black, it is true that you could use the black to hide that. In fact, I did that on another piece. I think it's another piece that's going to be coming out soon. And but on here, I was just going for accuracy. So I wanted to make sure that it was good, and then we can always turn on the black, and if you can't see it, that's fine, but at least I know it's there and I don't have to worry about it if I were to ever, let's say, pull this character out later and alter something. Because technically I could pull this character out and I could change the tone of her skin a little bit, I could change the type of lipstick she has on, all those types of things, because they're on different layers, so it'll be really easy to adjust something along those lines. So you can see here we're working on that side of the head. It is technically still doing some symmetry. In fact, you can see if you look really carefully, but I'm not actually concerned with that because it's going to get wiped out by the hair eventually anyways. Also, I mentioned that this is a fairly desaturated piece. Right now those eyes are pretty saturated, but you will see by the time we're done with this portion, I do desaturate those as well. Overall, I think the palette is pretty nice. It's like kind of calming, and I think that that's really what I was going for. So having it all be desaturated like that works out pretty well. There you can see with me playing with the opacity of the lip color. By adjusting that opacity, we are effectively adjusting the opacity from like a program point of view, but from like a this person as a real person point of view, it's more changing the color of that lipstick, the perception of the color of that lipstick. And so by making it a little lighter, we can see some of the shadow work a little bit better, and we can just kind of play with it both up and down in value a little bit more. So I have the eyeshadow turned off so that we can see the eyelids a little bit better for our shadow purposes, but the eyeshadow gets turned back on here in a second, and we get to see how all of that is playing together. Right now we're doing some shadowing around the eyebrows, if you're wondering sort of like what's happening right now. Eyeshadow's turned back on. Now we're doing a supplementary shadow layer underneath the nose and underneath the eyes, like in the eye sockets, so that we can push that a little bit more. Same thing with this little embellishment on the bridge of the nose to really accent the dip there. Okay, so we selected the hair and we cleared away from the AO. Now we are doing the AO around the hair. This is done on its own layer, set to multiply, but then I'm pretty sure we then merge it all back in together, but we'll see when we get there. If all of the shadow layers flip bright for a second and then go back again, we'll know that that's what happened. One thing that we're going to see get adjusted here in a minute, there's the shadow layers getting merged, and one thing that you'll notice here is that I thought the shadow underneath the chin was just a little too far down. It started looking like a bigger cast shadow, and I wanted it to be softer, more of an ambient occlusion shadow. I can't remember if I completely solved the problem here, but I definitely pull it way back and get it more in line with what I'm going for. I also add a little bit of an extra, much softer gradient shadow there, so that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to emphasize the darkness under there, but not make it a cast shadow. Now, though, we've moved into the direct shadow layer where we're actually, from the key light, we're putting in those heavier cast shadows. You can see down onto her arm in the bottom left of the illustration, and you can see obviously underneath her chin onto her neck. I'm just focusing on major parts of her that are going to cast shadows onto other parts of her. So of course we're going to focus on things like the hair and the as I said a second ago, like her head casting onto her neck, the parts in her ears so that we can really push the depth there, and then things like her nose casting a shadow. This is, I believe, done with the same color for the shadow as the ambient occlusion shadow. But you're definitely it's gonna seem a little bit richer here because it's just getting laid in nice and thick at 100% instead of getting like smudged and moved and everything, so that it starts becoming more transparent. That's what's happening with the AO one. So that on the cast shadow, we're getting it more just like this is the color. So now here we're just putting some extra shadowing in, like on the iris there. As this proceeds, we're going to see some glints get put into the eyes, as well as I add a little bit of, it's not really 5 o'clock shadow, but just like the part of her head that's shaved, I add some of the stubble or some of the darkening that happens there right here. All I'm doing for that is sampling the hair color, painting in the right hairline, and then lowering the opacity on it quite a bit. Now we've turned on the tattoos and we need to start adjusting them. So I deleted the blurred tattoo, then started adjusting the tattoo on the ear, adjusting the designs on her neck that were previously covered up by the hand-drawn shadow, and just sort of combing through and making sure every part of it is okay. Now I've lowered its opacity and duplicated it, meaning the shadow, the tattoo layers, geez, I can't talk, so that we're trying to replicate the look and feel of tattoos. I then add this sort of vignetting lighting around her, and I've added, the vignetted shadow, it's lighting, but I'm representing it through the shadow, and then I'm adding some supplementary shadow bits to try and sell some of her anatomy a little bit more. We're selling the collarbone, her deltoid, some neck tendony stuff, as well as her face. Now, something I want to start talking about before we get there is the light. I'm going to start painting in like a blue reflected light that's on her. And the way that this is all going to work with the tattoos, I'm going to talk through this even though some other stuff might be happening on screen at the same time. The way tattoos work, if you ever see them, is a shadow will of course darken it, but light hitting a tattoo at the right angle will still reflect because the skin is reflective, and when it reflects there, then you don't really see the tattoo that well because you're seeing the reflection. It'd be like if you had a shiny print and you can see the print totally fine, but then as soon as the light hits it at the right angle, all you see is the glare. It's similar to that. So the way that I try to capture that when I'm painting is all the shadows and stuff will be multiplies, and the tattoos in this case are all black, so they'll be fine. And if they were color anyways, I'd probably set the tattoos to multiply because that's the closest to what it looks like in real life. But then the lighting layer that I'm going to put on the blue one, it's not set to multiply. Well, it wouldn't be set to multiply, but it's not set to overlay or lighten or anything that makes something brighter, color dodge, screen, because I don't actually want it to play with the tattoo colors underneath. If it responded to its contrast like that, like let's say with an overlay layer, it would actually be still dark on the black. What instead I wanted to do is I wanted to be just independent, its own color, a normal layer with its opacity lowered so that it's sitting on top. And what that's going to do is it's going to replicate the vibe of it's just on top above the tattoo. It's not being affected by the tattoo. It's going to be its own sheen no matter what. So you can see right now I'm painting it in with the tattoos off, just like I did with the shadows. I'm just making sure that I'm respecting the anatomy and trying to sell her anatomy first and foremost. And then when we turn the tattoos on, we're going to see that that's sitting on top of all of them. And we can adjust its opacity to make sure it looks right, but the point is not to have it blend. The point is we do want that light to overpower the tattoos. Now we're doing the hair shines, which are on the same layer. Actually, I think I did separate them because with her black hair, I knew I was going to want to control that a little bit differently, so I'm pretty sure they're separate. If you rewind a bit, you see I just put it in kind of messy, and then I went in and refined it later. I of course have the hair selected, so that's how I'm able to do this kind of messy and keep it all under control. I will then eventually do another pass where it's still a reduced opacity layer of the same color, but it's a higher opacity, higher opacity, as you can see right there, so we can get the hotness of the center part of that shine. We'll of course play with it, lower its opacity more. I've got it higher right there so that I can see it all very well, but now you can see that we've lowered its opacity, and we'll sort of let that relax a little bit more. In a minute, we're going to be turning the tattoos back on, and you're going to get to see what all of these different lighting layers, how they all play with the tattoo layers, which are all sitting on top of all the flats. There you go. So you can see where the light is hitting the tattoos. It's staying lighter. It's a lowered opacity. It's not 100%, so it is going to let some of that tattoo through, but it is muting it a lot more than if it were set to something like an overlay or a color dodge or something along those lines. Now we're going through and making sure all of the bounce light is represented. So that means on something like the bouncing onto the underside of the nose or bouncing onto the lips, there's a shine I threw in there on the lips just to make sure that the texture of the lip is, the glossiness of the lip is sold. And yeah, right now this is that phase where I'm sort of darting around doing a bunch of little bits. Now this part's just pure chaos as I test a bunch of different things. I'm trying to search for, is this blue background the right background? Let's turn these layers on and off. Let's make sure all these values are correct. And so that's all of the flickering that you see here, trying out kind of a more yellowy green background, getting away from that blue. But now just to trying to sit in this sort of sophisticated palette range instead of making something too poppy, is lowering the opacity on this yellow. Right now we're using the yellow at full opacity because we're also doing this dark outline around the yellow outline, and then we'll lower both of those, which is what just happened there, so that we are, it's implied and it's there and the viewer can see it, but it's not as stark. So really this character and this portrait is trying to go for this high contrast look with her as a character, and then also trying to find a lot of sophistication in the palette. So the blackness of her hair and her tattoos and her lips, etc., and the whiteness of her skin is what's the strong statement here, and then all of the other colors, everything from the way her skin shifts from one shade, one one value and one hue to another is fairly subtle. The background is a fairly subtle color. The outline is fairly subtle. Everything is trying to be subtle aside from that strong black and white contrast that's happening. And that's really just trying to key in on the vibe of the original drawing in the painted version, which I think is something that's sometimes challenging for me to maintain. So since this is an otherwise simple endeavor, since the drawing was already done, I wanted to really focus on that and maintain that as much as possible. So now we're adding a rim light on one side of her. I don't think it was entirely necessary. I think the image could have gone without it and it still would have been okay, but I just really was trying to sell her dimension, and I thought that just putting in a nice heavy rim light was going to really benefit me there. My dog is snoring next to me. I don't know if she's coming through on the mic, so sorry if she is. She just snored even louder when I said that. So we're getting this rim light put in. It's white. It's been lowered in opacity. That's what you just saw right there. And it has actually been duplicated, darkened, and blurred a little just to slightly increase the darkness right before it curves into the brighter part. We get some subsurface scattering on that ear because of the rim light. That's just done with a layer of, I think it's a bit of a orangey yellow set to color dodge, and then it's just sort of put in there, and then its opacity is adjusted until it looks right, basically. Here we're just tweaking certain things, which is why you're seeing the tattoos kind of turn on and off, and I put in the line layer, the original drawing, so I could see sort of that tweak. Everything you see where I'm turning something on and off, it's because I noticed something and I need to dig down to those layers, fix it, and then turn them all back on. And here we are into the home stretch, and that right there is the final piece. There was a time where I told myself I wasn't going to go back and color this one because I just always thought it was good as a nice black and white image, although I am happy that I feel like I colored it but retained that vibe that I'm looking for. So let's go ahead and check out the original again. And then let's go back to the final. So I hope you dug the revisiting of this piece. As I said, I'm happy with the way it came out. You know, always trying to dig up old line art that I think should be colored just because I think it'd be really fun. And this one just, I think, happened to be a bigger success than some of the others. So, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider liking, subscribing, hit the bell, do all those things that lets YouTube know you like watching these videos. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.